I don't regret what I got. I'm sorry for everything that's happened to you. You meant something to me. Still do. That I ain't never gonna live down.
Welcome back to another Penguin Breakdown, where today we're gonna be talking about episode 3 and everything that happened during it, some of the details you may have missed, and breaking down that ending because a lot of stuff happened this episode. And it was a fantastic one at that. The acting continues to be phenomenal, and on top of it, Vic and Penguin's relationship is great. You can really see the contrast of like a scared kid who's kind of learning to respect a man who's also terrifying, but also does not want to have his men fear him, but respect him and trust him. So it's really interesting how they're doing stuff. Sophia is slowly breaking from her psyche, which is leading to some really exciting stuff down the road. Now, this episode starts off with a flashback to the Batman, where the Riddler destroys the city. And honestly, when I first watched this, I thought this was just Vic going to go see his friends and hang out with them for once, which I did not put two and two together when they started talking about Bella Real on the TV and talking about the election. However, as soon as they got up to the roof and everything started exploding, well, that's when I put two and two together. But it was interesting as they got into this. You see Vic has a nice family. Vic goes to see his friend Calvin, who's working for the Squid, which in the comics, the Squid is named Lawrence Lohman, and he's a crime boss in Gotham City. So an interesting little tidbit to that, but then everything went to shit really quickly when everything blew up. And in the end, when Gotham flooded, that huge wave of water hit Vic's apartment, killing his family, which is pretty dark. However, in the last episode, they did say he was from Crown Point, which was decimated from the flooding. So I guess it does make sense when we see what actually happened to Vic. And on top of everything there, Calvin, his friend, is the one that Sophia shot in episode 1. Because later when he's talking to Garcia, she's asking if he's seen Calvin, and we know what happened to him. He's dead. And the episode starts off really interesting with the Penguin and Vic. How the Penguin's like, his plan is to have Luca Falcone take out Sophia once he rises to the top. So he's still using people against one another so that he can rise to the top and gain all the power that he wants. Which is so ironic because in this episode, he flip-flops over and over. He's so good at manipulating people and seeming like he cares just so that he can get what he wants. And you can really see that anger come out of him too when he's getting called a joke, when he's not being respected by Vidi later in the episode. If you disrespect him, the Penguin's coming after you. He might not accept that name yet, but at some point he will. And he will rightfully be called the Penguin. And it's really interesting to see him kind of go through this change as he rises to the top. And it's so interesting, and I'm really loving the acting from it. It's also funny just to see how nonchalant Penguin is about some of the jokes he makes, about just some of the darker killings and everything, where Vic is terrified. You can see how he's scared of Sophia, but the Penguin just keeps making jokes about it, and it is funny, and it did make you laugh a little bit. So with the seriousness and these little jokes, it works really well with the series. Plus, it was interesting to see Vic call Sophia the Hangman, and the Penguins tell him not to believe everything he hears, because later in the episode, it turns out that the Penguin was the reason for Sophia going to Arkham. He did something that set her up where he said he didn't expect Carmine Falcone to send her to Arkham, so whatever he did got her sent away and put in a bad place. However, the way they kind of show this in this episode with Sophia saying, "I'm not the Hangman, stop calling me that," it might be her psyche, where she has two personalities. One's the Hangman, one's Sophia Falcone, and we see the Hangman trying to break out. Because we saw in the last episode that she has scars on her neck that looks like something that she's trying to literally crawl out. And it's really interesting to see how, one psyche thinks that she's not the Hangman, while the other one is trying to break out so her psychopathic tendencies will be let free. And it's really interesting to see because we're going to watch her crack over the season, watch her become the Hangman persona, and it's going to be freaking insane when she does. We also learn in this episode that Alberto's drug plan is actually Sophia and Alberto's plan, where these drugs are actually from Arkham, the drug called Bliss, which in the comics, this first appeared in a Teen Titans run back in 2008, which is a drug created from reprocessed hormone secretions of kidnapped adolescents, which is really crazy when you think about it. Then later on in the comics, there's a new take on the drug, which is a two-way psychic connector between the brain and a citywide swath of drug takers so that he can expand his mental capacity to godlike degrees. So obviously, we're not going either of these routes. However, the drug was being used at Arkham, put the inmates in a docile state so that they weren't a threat. But in this, it's a drug created from the spores on blood-toothed fungi. So really interesting to see how they're changing it up, because the comic version is kind of twisted. But this one is also a little bit crazy, where it's making them have a euphoric stimulant high. And the chemist they have working for them, his name is Trey Bloom, which could be a reference to Mr. Bloom from the comics, a Batman villain, where in the comics, Mr. Bloom was a Gotham City power broker, which gave people superpowers. He provides his seeds, which once they're implanted in people's bodies, would give them extraordinary superpowers. In the comics as well, Mr. Bloom went on to sell those seeds to the Penguin. When he revealed he had no intention of giving Penguin the seed, the Penguin shot him in the head. But Bloom survived because of his metahuman abilities and then stabbed the Penguin and his men. So really interesting that if this was a tease for Mr. Bloom, that would be pretty cool. Don't think people are going to get superpowers in this universe, but it's awesome to see that there's little references that can connect to other characters from the DC Comics. When we continue in the episode, we see Johnny Vitti trying to get rid of Sophia by threatening her that if she doesn't leave, he's going to tell her where she went, which when I first saw this, I'm like, she's going to kill him. That is what's going to happen, and I'm actually surprised that didn't happen this episode, but it all came back around when Penguin used his blackmail he had on him to get Luca's wife to go sleep with them so that he could use that as blackmail to get Vitti to follow his plan. Which is really interesting to see that Vitti is just going to get used. He's definitely dying at one point. Just to see him get used by the Penguin is great, especially when he calls the Penguin a joke, disrespects him, and says the Penguin is nothing. Like, that sends Penguin off. When you could see that rage that the Penguin has, that could be his downfall, the rage that he feels when he gets talked down to, and it's really interesting to see how that's changed, especially when we see him in the episode right before this moment where he gets mad at the waiter for not letting Vic finish talking when he's stuttering. It's showing that the Penguin has a softer side, but also that rage will come out and he will get you. But the whole distribution of drugs is really interesting when they go to the Triad, another crime faction in Gotham. And I tried looking names for both Link Sai and Feng Zhao, and I couldn't find anything in the comics relating to their names. So if you know what their names could be referenced to, let me know down in the comments. And I thought it was really interesting that we had Vic getting pulled over by the cops in Penguin's car, and the guys suspecting him of doing something illegal, trying to get him on something. So when he finds cash on him, he easily takes that bribe, showing that corruption in Gotham. And I really like how Penguin was proud of Vic for doing that. Just been like, nice job. And it's really interesting to see that relationship, because that relationship really built in this episode when we're focusing on them kind of having their two odds, where Vic is questioning leaving Gotham, going with Garcia to go on to a new life, go to California, and leave all this behind. Something that his father wouldn't want him doing anyways. But then having Penguin trusting him, having Vic be his guy, as when they're trying to sell the drugs, Penguin's so excited going to Vic, trusting him and everything, just to find out Vic is thinking about leaving, and he loses it. And this is the part of the episode that was really interesting, because the Penguin just got everything he wanted. He's selling the drugs, the Triad's in, and the Penguin snaps, which is where we see his inner rage comes out. Getting mad at Vic for thinking he's being held hostage. He doesn't have his own free will, because the Penguin is super disrespected by this. It makes him feel like shit, because that's not the world he's trying to build. He's trying to build mutual respect. They work together. He's mentoring Vic to rise to the top with him, teaching him the ways of Gotham. And it's really interesting to see how he got mad, how he was getting mad at that, being like, he could have left at any point he wanted to, but he chose to say that there's no right or wrong, there's just survival. And I really like how that kind of shows where Vic and Penguin are. Vic is just a scared kid. He was getting PTSD from all the loud music during the club, showing what happened to his family, remembering the traumatic experience that changed his life. And the reason he gets that, I'm pretty sure, is because he's reliving his past with Garcia and talking about leaving and everything else. So that's why he's having that PTSD show up and why he's losing it. And I just really like the scene with Penguin getting mad at him, because it kind of shows that the Penguin's not evil. Even though he is the bad guy, it shows him in this moment that he's not purely evil. Because at the moment, he could have killed Vic. He could have taken him out. As soon as Vic left, he could have ordered his death. But instead, he didn't. And I think he also knew that Vic would come back at some point because he trusted him. He might have just been having a little bit of cold feet at that moment, but Vic would have came back. However, the reason Penguin blew up too is probably from the multiple things that happened during this episode. First with Vitti, of course, but then with Sophia. Because when Sophia turns around to him and says, Zhao is here to see me, not my former driver. Really showing the Penguin that she's still in control, not trusting him. Probably messed with Penguin's head. Even though he got what he wanted in the end, the Triad accepted it, it really pushed him to like be pissed off. And I do like how when Sophia was going over with the Triad, talking about how, yeah, she danced on her dad's grave too, because Zhao wasn't feeling her because he didn't know her. She's manipulating him, using him, saying what he wants to hear, and it shows how smart Sophia is and how she's good at using people. So I really like that. We got mention of the Odessa Mob again, which we talked about in episode 1, a faction of the Bratva. Then they mentioned the Neon Dragon Triad, which in the comics appeared in Batman and Robin #4 from 2009. Then it all leads into, after the freakout, to Sophia and Penguin kind of having a good moment where we learn about the Arkham and how Penguin was the reason she got sent there, learning that she can't trust Penguin and where are they going to begin to work together, which all led into the Penguin getting emotional, talking about how he got to where he is and that he doesn't regret how he got there, but he felt bad for sending her to Arkham. Which could just be him manipulating her, but he definitely did pull a grade A acting performance, making us feel for him, making us think he's actually meaning some of the stuff he says. All he wanted was a better life. That's what he got. That's what he made his way to the top. And then he apologizes to her for everything that happened to her. So he doesn't feel bad. He's glad he did what he did so he can get to where he is. However, there might be a small part of him that feels bad that she got sent to Arkham. He probably just wanted to get rid of her, depending on what he did, but she got sent to probably one of the worst places to get sent to in Gotham. He even says that she meant something to him and still does. This feels like keen manipulating. He's trying to get her to trust him any way possible, doing everything he can, and that way, if he does get her to trust her, then he could just betray her. Which he does literally at the end of the episode, where Nadia Maroney pulls up, knowing the Penguin's playing her. So Sophia knows he went to the Maroneys now. But then Vic pulls up, drives into the guy holding the gun, gets out of there, but they leave Sophia behind. Which right there, it's like, you were just working all this way to getting Sophia to trust you, and then you just abandoned her. So I think this moment is probably going to be sending her over the edge for episode 4, because when we go into episode 4, that is the midway through the season, which is usually when everything starts to go to shit in TV shows. So right now, we have the Penguin trying to manipulate Sophia, saying that she meant something to him. He's sorry for what she went through. However, all at the same time, while trying to get her to trust him, he even abandons her. So all this is leading to her snapping, not trusting the Penguin anymore, and probably going on a rampage and becoming the Hangman persona. Because we were talking about her psyche breaking, I feel like this will be the moment her psyche breaks. Or at least in the next episode, we'll see that psyche break and her turn into the serial killer that everyone knows her as. So really interesting to see what they're doing this episode. A lot of good acting. A lot of good moments showing the manipulating kind of sides of the different factions. Having the Penguin manipulate Vic, and Vic trust him, get him as his right-hand man. But then also getting Sophia to try to trust him again, but Sophia not trusting him, but using Penguin to get what she wants. So just everyone is using them for something else. So really interesting to see what they did. And at the same time, Vic is accepting that darker side of him because he didn't go with Garcia. He instead left and went back to the Penguin, accepting that new darker life that he's kind of put himself in. And it's going to be really interesting to see where he goes this season. I don't think he's making it out alive. I definitely think he's dying by the end of the season. But it'll probably be, honestly, a really emotional scene where the Penguin did trust him. He did care about him, but then he had to take him out himself. So I'm really excited to see what happens during the season. It's been so good so far. First 3 episodes are phenomenal. And honestly, I think it's going to be like that for the rest of the season. So let me know, were there any Easter eggs or references you noticed during this episode that I might have missed? I'm curious to see what you noticed during this episode. Let me know what you thought of the episode itself. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, hit the like, hit the subscribe button. It helps out the channel a lot. And you get to stay up to date with all my breakdowns and reviews. Thanks again, and I'll talk to you next week when we watch another episode of The Penguin.